Well, hello, writers around the world. This is Jim Parsons with lesson 25 of Write That Novel Now. Over these 25 weeks, I've looked at how you start off your novel and all the things you need to know about writing it, like the structure of it, dialogue. And last week, we got to writing the darkest moment and the climax. Almost the end of your novel, basically. This is the key point of your novel towards the end. So now it remains to write the conclusion, which is often called the denouement, how it all pans out, the denouement. So let's look at doing that. Coming to the end of the novel, when you write those magic words, the end, one part of your head might have a sense of triumph. I've made it. And that's a worthwhile thing to think about. But another part of you is going to experience a sense of loss, sorrow. Many writers experience this. I certainly have on every novel I've written. You see, we have lived with this character or this family of characters for many months, many years. They become like family. And to walk away from them, switch them off and move on, it's rather like a divorce. We have lived in this world that we've created for some time. We've experienced all the problems we've dished out to our characters. So little wonder we are so invested in this particular story. So please be aware of that. If you experience it, it's quite usual. If you've already prone to depression, please be aware that you may end up depressed. You need to seek help. You can mention it. I mean, your psychologist might fall about laughing, but it's a very genuine issue that people who finish novels end up feeling very down. So keep that in mind. Meanwhile, let's have a look now. I'll switch over to a PowerPoint presentation. Let's have a look at how we go about writing the denouement, the conclusion of your novel. And I'll also include a section on how the conclusion might differ if you're writing a trilogy or a series. Okay, over to the PowerPoint. Well, there it is, the end. You finally typed it. How do you feel? Pretty good, yeah. You've come to the end. A moment of triumph. And well, you could feel that way too. Many people don't get that far. So let's have a look at what's involved in that last chapter, portion of a chapter even, before you get to write those magic words. Be aware that your book is over at the climax. You're now on borrowed time. Now, I know that might seem strange to you. You don't want to leave this book, as I said in my introduction. You don't want to leave this world that you've created. There's a danger that you'll want to add a little bit or wind back the clock and do something else, anything to prevent yourself from writing the end and acknowledging it over. Your reader is not quite as invested as you are in the book. Sure, many times readers think, oh no, it's almost over. Right, that's fine. But once you give your reader that amazing darkest moment, climax, the book is essentially over for them. That's what they were waiting for, see if the character succeeded in his or her goal. That's what they were waiting on. And having delivered that, your book is finished for the reader. So it's important to you to wind it up as quickly as you can. Don't think about subplots, what happened to Uncle Harry or anything like that. The general rule is the subplots that you include in your story and intertwine with your main plot, they need to finish and be accounted for before you get to the darkest moment of the main plot. That's a general rule that you should adhere to, because the darkest moment and climax of your main plot, that's the biggie. That's what finishes your book. So everything else should be neatly wrapped up before you get to that. So because your reader is satisfied with that darkest moment and climax, they're ready to leave. So please don't bore or irritate your reader with trivialities, with new directions and characters or incidents. Don't introduce anything new at this point. Your book's over. You now should tie up any important ends. You don't have to cover every final last detail. Some things the reader won't even be concerned to know about. But if there's some important things, then you can tie them up and do it quickly. It's easy to do it quickly. For example, if at some stage Uncle Harry helped at a dangerous point and ended up falling over a cliff or being wounded or something like that, and you haven't been back to say what happened to Uncle Harry, well, yes, technically the reader might want to know that. You don't have to have a show it. All you need to do, let's say there's a wedding at the end of your lovely story, and as the bride and groom turn to survey the crowd, there's Uncle Harry in the first row with his leg in plaster and 2 crutches. That's all the reader will want to know. Yep, Uncle Harry made it through. All they need. So look for ways you can bring some of these things to the end, treat them very quickly without having to spell it out. Yes, Uncle Harry climbed up out of the hole and this happened, and then he went to hospital and the doctors worked day and night on him and this happened and that. Don't need that. You just need to show Uncle Harry is back in the story as well. There's many types of subplots to be treated like that, or many incidental things. And now you can either show the anticipated outcome, what your reader's been expecting to happen. I mean, if your character had to overcome the wicked prince and become king, and we see him defeat the wicked prince, the expectation is that we're going to see him become king. And so you'll have a little scene where that happens. If you don't want to show a full scene, it could be courtier comes to him and says, "Sire, we must measure you up for your kingly regalia." That's enough. Everybody knows then that he's made it to the outcome we expect. Okay, there's silly little things, I know, that these are some of the ways that you can give a hint. If you've written a romance, clearly the whole idea of a romance is that 2 people get together. Often it is marriage, maybe it's not, but let's talk about a romance that is headed for a marriage. Either you show them getting married, or else the prospective bride might turn to the prospective groom and say, "So, how many guests are we going to invite?" We know that there's a wedding. Another lovely thing you can do is somehow bring your story full circle. Have some little thing at the very end. It might be a reference to some phrase or something that happened in the opening chapter, and that brings your story full circle, and it creates a sense of wholeness. Let's say you show your character driving to work locked up in a traffic jam, right? By the end of the story, it ends up with the character back in the traffic jam, but now there's a beautiful girl in the seat beside him, the one that he's met and married or whatever. Okay, so you can do that. Okay. As you know, I've repeatedly warned about trying to write a series or a trilogy, planning a trilogy and writing it as one enormous story that you just chop off. You don't do it that way. You have to give your reader something solid that they've actually invested in their story all the way through, and they need to see the goal that you set at the beginning of that story. They need to see that met, or else they're going to feel very gruntled. So my suggestion is, if you do intend writing several books using the same character, treat it like staging posts on a mountain climb. Every day's climb has a point that they need to reach. Maybe the supplies are there, someone setting up tents or whatever. All right. So these are the stages in a climb. You haven't reached the summit. The summit is still up there ahead. But every day is enough for that day. We have a goal to reach a particular stage, and that's how you should write your books. Set intermediate goals that are worthwhile, beating this one, achieving some stage, and that's enough for that book. Let your character sense of triumph, let your readers have a sense of relief that they've made it and achieved the goal set for this book. So conclude your present goal that you've set strongly and positively. Give the reader that satisfaction. Think of what I said with that last page. Tie up all the loose ends associated with the present book, present stage. Complete all those functions that I previously mentioned as if you're writing a standalone novel. Then, now you could end with a hint of unfinished business or trouble in the offing. This is how you would encourage your readers to go on to the next story. You don't have to make it a cliffhanger where they don't find out how this book ends. They need to find out how this book ends nice and solidly, and then have a hint of unfinished business. Now, that unfinished business should not be so much that it takes away the satisfaction. Here's an example. Let's say this is the ending. Bjork took his new queen's hand and stepped out onto the balcony. The crowd below burst into a roar of applause and cheering. Queen Mildred looked at him and smiled fondly. "They love you," she said. The end. You could write. Okay, that could be the end of a standard novel. But if you want to let your readers know that this is just a stage in the story, this is just one small goal achieved, then it might go on. Queen Mildred looked at him and smiled fondly. "They love you," she said. He nodded and smiled. He would not let thoughts of Prince Igor spoil this precious moment. But Igor would soon learn that his sister betrayed the clan, marry a Ostrovian, and he would be far from her. Bjork suspected his battle-weary army. Okay, by putting that in, you haven't started a new story, but your reader knows that there's another book coming up that's going to look at Prince Igor mounting his revenge and that Bjork is ready to deal with it. So you've hinted at what the next story will be. That's all you need to do. So yes, you've written the end. Wonderful news. Thousands of novice writers type chapter 1, but very few write the end. So if you have, congratulate yourself. Have a glass of bubbly or your favourite treat. This is quite a moment. Let's not downplay it. You've done well. You're one of a handful of novice writers who've started a book and actually finished it. But be aware that you haven't finished. You've completed your first draft. And this is where the writing actually begins. But first, it's important that you get this story out of your head. You're too enamored of it. You're too keen on it as it is. You think it's wonderful. Let's hope it is. But you need to see it in the cold, hard light of day. So my recommendation is try to put it away to incubate. Very often said, you're mourning it. You don't want to stop writing, so you want to keep at it. But it's important. If you finish the first draft, put it away to incubate. And only come back when you think it will feel strange to you, as if someone else wrote it. And now have to attend, not as a lover, now a critic. Estranged from it, or should be. Now, how do you deal with this period? I know you'd be itching to get at it again. But please, put it away. This is when you should catch up with family and friends who have been wondering when you're going to come out of your den and stop writing. So do some of those catch-up things. If you're an artist, have a go at some painting. Or if you just can't help yourself, start your new book. Because there's every possibility that as you've been writing one, you've been getting all these lovely ideas for your next book. So start writing it. Even if it is the continuation, the next one in your trilogy. Start writing. Forget about the other one. Put it away. When you pick it up again, if you've left it long enough, it should seem a little bit strange to you. I know when I've read through something that I've written, some things will leap out at me as absolutely bloody awful. And other bits will seem so good, I think, I really write that. So you're going to have those moments too. What I'd suggest that you do, if you want to read right straight away and see how it feels to you, but in doing so, initially don't go looking for spelling errors and punctuation and things like that. This is something you should do in stages. Start off looking for structural issues. Does it all make sense and hang together? Are there bits that don't figure? Maybe chapters need to be transposed here or there. Have you spotted any weak areas that need strengthening? Now, if you don't know, ask someone else. Ask another writer. Better not family and friends. I mean, family and friends will have very great difficulty in saying anything other than, oh, I loved it. Oh, you're such a wonderful writer. You don't need that. You need criticism. So unless you know that someone's pretty cold-blooded about doing this for you, my wife, awful to me. She's absolutely awful as my writing mentor. I feel embarrassed at some of the points I write. So if you've got someone that's prepared to be honest with you, well and good. Otherwise, join a writing group and ask people to exchange work with you. Or seek a writing mentor if you're really serious and you want some professional help. I am a writing mentor, as I said. I'd be happy to take on look at it. You can just get my structural mentoring package, which costs $99, and it consists of 3 questionnaires where I will take you through all the things you need certain of, that all these structural elements are present in your book. They're all strong enough, and I will critique it and make sure it's strong enough. And you'll find that that's very good value. You send me your responses to my questions, and then I comment on your responses. And this email dialogue continues until we feel we can't get anything more out of each of the 3 packages. So that's the first thing. And you can leave it at that if you've established that your structural aspect of your you want me then to go on and do a chapter by chapter mentoring with you. That costs $7 Australian per 1,000 words. We do it on a chapter by chapter basis, so cost per chapter is not very great at all. Your average 2,000 to 4,000 chapter costs $14 to $28. Mind you, over 100,000 words, it certainly mounts up. I don't think I'm conning you here. It can mount up, but you're paying it very gradually and you're getting professional advice. So that's an offer for you if you've got a manuscript or a half bit of manuscript that's driving you nuts. Come and see me about that, and I'll give you my email address as I usually do at the end. So that's writing mentorship. Okay, what else can you do? Having looked at the overall structural issues, jot down your chapter numbers and the word count for each chapter. Easy to do that, just get Word to do a word count for you for each chapter. Very easy to do. And look at your chapter lengths. Are they all much for muchness? Is there a reasonable range of chapter lengths? If so, good. You don't have to make them all exact. But if you find, let's say they're all averaging out at about 2,000 words, great, roughly that, and suddenly you find one that's 500 words, you know you've got to do something about it. You either have to somehow blend it in with the one before it or the one that's after it, or you've got to pump it up somehow to get it up to the right word count. If you've got one in this batch that's roughly 2,000 words, that's 4,000 or 5,000 words, well, very clearly, you're going to have to chop it in two somewhere. You're going to have to go through, find a way to chop it, and maybe create a new ending for the first half so that it sounds good. So they're the sort of things you can do with your chapter lengths. I advise people not to try too hard as they're doing their first draft to get all their chapter lengths working, because it's a distraction. Write down what you want to say. And quite likely these things will fall into place automatically for you, but if they don't, the time will come, second draft, when you look at these issues. Once you've done those structural things, the word count for chapters and the overall making sense, then you can get down to the text of the writing, the style, the writing style. Your style will emerge, and it's very hard to change that. You've got to work with that. But look for areas of purple prose. Purple prose, if you don't know what that means, it simply means where you've gone right over the top with your language that you've used. You're using beautiful, long, wonderful sounding words, one after the other. And it's just gone over the top. One clue is, if you read a passage and you think, oh, how wonderful, that's wonderful writing, very likely purple prose, and your reader will gag on it. Okay, we do tend to think we've written beautifully because we try to sound writerly. You know, if you're a novice writer, you've got this impression of what a writer sounds like, and you're trying to do it, and you end up overdoing it, and you get purple prose, where you're just going over the top. Be careful of your metaphors and similes, that they don't become over the top, or mixed metaphors where you've got sailing ship metaphors mixed in with desert metaphors and church metaphors. It's very easy to do when you think you're writing great prose. Very easy to get it looking really ugly in the end. So you're looking for wordiness, you're looking for purple prose on the one hand, and on the other hand, you're looking for overly spare and bare writing. Other sections where you're really not tapping your reader's senses, where you're just telling them that the scene looked grim, rather than letting them smell the smells, hear the sounds, and see the sights. So somewhere you've got to get this balance between bare writing and purple prose. Look for the overuse of adjectives and adverbs. Right? Often a good, strong verb is what you need instead of weak verb plus an adverb to say how. He ran quickly, right? He rushed, or whatever. Look out for cliches. This is my downfall. Cliche. Look out for cliches, worn out phrases. Watch for monotony. Sentences that start with he did, right? He walked, he ran, he smiled. All the way down the page. Watch out for that sort of monotony. Watch out for the same construction. Two phrases connected by and or but all the way down. As I said in one of my earlier lessons, even thinking you're doing the right thing by getting rid of ands and buts and using a semicolon, for example, even a heap of semicolons starts to get monotonous. Just got to make sure that you're varying your writing wherever you can. Your dialogue's always going to be a very useful, good part of your writing, but just watch out for talking heads syndrome. When you're not actually writing it, when you're reviewing it and critiquing it, have a look at your dialogue. Okay, does it stretch for a whole page? Have a look and see how many bits were inserted, like setting descriptions, facial expressions, and bodily movements. And most importantly, POV thoughts, reflection on the conversation from the character. If you haven't got any of that or much of it, you're probably suffering from syndrome. And of course, always check for a telly narrative. You know, show, don't tell. So there's some of the things you need to look for on your second run through. Third run through, maybe then, once you've fixed all these structural things and stylistic matters, right at the end, because you're going to make some changes, right at the end, you check your spelling, capitalisation, your grammar, and your punctuation. And if you really don't feel confident about doing that, again, contact me. I do that sort of stuff too, at a price. Nevertheless, if you want your book to look and sound good at the end, and you're prepared to pay for that work, I'm very happy to help. So that's all the things you need to know about the end. Well, that's it for lesson 25. I'm hoping to wind up this series by lesson 30. We have a few esoteric things to discuss, like the mythic hero's journey, the central character's interior journey, and we'll also look at a few stylistic things like metaphors, similes, and some other things to work into your writing style. Meanwhile, to close this lesson off, let me remind you, as I said in the PowerPoint presentation, if you really would like me to help you with mentoring you through your writing, contact me and I will, no obligation, I can just explain to you in detail how we go about it and what the various packages are and how much it might cost you. No obligation. Here is my email address. Bye-bye now. Thanks for watching. Keep safe.